Welcome back to The Secret Life of Coins from the Royal Museum with me, your host, Chris Barker. And I am joined, as ever, by my two co-hosts, Abigail Kenvin.
Hello.
And Dr. David Mason.
Hello.
Previously, in the last episode, we looked at how the state used the coinage to get its messages across. But in this episode, it's all about the people and how they have attempted to subvert that message and the power represented by coinage as state iconography. This is the public, therefore, defacing the coinage once it's been put into circulation to get their message across. Often occurs during times of political tension, crises, or civil unrest, and there are many, many examples of it from history.
We're talking about actual sort of physical manipulation here. We're talking essentially about hammering messages and letters and digits into the metal directly. And this is people outside of the mint who will have done this in what is usually quite a crude fashion, because obviously coins are quite a hard metal. They're not meant to have messages hammered into them. Physically
engraving something on there, stamping letters in, stamping digits in, altering the appearance of the coin.
Yeah, it's a fantastic vehicle. A coin is a fabulous vehicle in which to spread a message. And we see this during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So from the 1960s to the late 1990s, both sides took to stamping the initials of paramilitary organisations into the coinage. So for supporters of the IRA, in opposition to the British state,
which is the Irish Republican Army,
they would stamp their initials over the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II.
And to be clear, this is supporters of the various organisations. This isn't some big organised thing. We're dealing with coins here that are being defaced by individual people, often quite crudely, by hammering letters and digits.
This is the general public who support either side. And just as the IRA did it, the other side did it as well.
Yeah, the Ulster Volunteer Force, UVF, would also stamp those initials, but into the Irish coinage.
And so it's about subverting the power of a coin as a state iconography in order to get your message across. As an individual, it's finding a way to get your point of view over by doing that.
Yeah, and on something that everybody will be using. You would be finding these in your change.
Yeah, the point is you are slipping a message into circulation here. It's not a big showy thing, but it's something that will turn up in someone's pocket, and they will see that there is support out there for a specific group and a specific stance.
We've talked about the Troubles, very, very difficult period in Northern Irish and Irish history, and you get it with other periods of unrest. So there are examples of old pennies, pre-decimal pennies dated in the 1930s, where on Britannia's side, you've got little Nazi symbols stamped into the shield where you've got the Union flag on there. And that's probably people in the 30s doing that to show their support for Hitler and Nazism more generally. So that's a powerful, powerful thing.
Hugely so. And you get it sort of all the way through to more recent times as well. There's an example that I found in a brilliant book called Disobedient Objects of a dollar note in the US, which has been stamped over, inked over to kind of show the wealth disparity, that half of the wealth in the US at the time was owned by the richest 400 people and the other half was owned by the bottom 150 million people. So again, it's that's ink on paper, but it's defacing something that's part of a much more modern process.
And these are all very, poignant and significant messages or powerful messages, which many of us may certainly do find distasteful in some ways, but that's the point, isn't it? It's the point that you're making. There's the shock value to it all. It's the thing that people will see these in their change and react to them. That's why that's been done.
There's a brilliant quote from that book that I like, this book, Disobedient Objects, by Catherine Flood and Gavin Grindon. The way that they talk about these coins, they say that they're part of the popular everyday practice of political expression rather than an organised campaign.
Yeah, we see examples of votes for women being stamped into pennies. So very often referred to as suffragette penny. These would have circulated. We think they were done sort of 1913, 1914.
Height of the suffragette movement.
Yeah, height of the suffragette movement.
I mean, it's easy to look back now and think that that's obviously very different from a lot of these other examples we've spoken about. But at the time, that was still quite a controversial hot topic. That was something that was being actively argued for and in many cases argued against as well. This was something that needed a political message pushing it through.
It was an illegal act to deface the coinage. So it just goes to show the strength of the resolve and the desire to push in order to do something that was illegal. But, the cause was greater than that.
And it's a radical movement at the time. We've got suffragettes breaking windows, breaking the law generally to get their message across. In order to learn more, we went to speak with an excellent source. Helen Pankhurst is a women's rights activist and a direct descendant of Emmeline and Sylvia Pankhurst, both of whom were key figures in the women's suffrage movement, which campaigned for votes for women in the early 1900s.
My name's Helen Pankhurst, and I am Sylvia's granddaughter, Emmeline Pankhurst's great-granddaughter. And clearly with that surname, they have influenced a lot of what I've done. So I consider myself a women's rights advocate, and I carry those issues into a lot of the work I do, either through international development work or through local and national campaigning, particularly around women in politics. So the suffragettes were formed by my family and some of their friends, so by the Pankhurst women in 1903, to demand that women get the vote. It comes on the back of the suffrage movement that had been campaigning for over 50 years for women to get the vote, and had been campaigning constitutionally, so writing letters, demanding again, having conversations with parliamentarians, with the Prime Minister of the time, etc., and not really getting very far. So the suffragettes are seen to be that group that increased the ante, I suppose, by demanding that change. The term suffragette was coined by the Daily Mail as a bit of an insult, making fun of this group that was campaigning for women to get the vote and that had some people imprisoned, particularly Christabel Pankhurst and Annie Kenney, and they were the first to be imprisoned for the cause. And so the Daily Mail coined this term suffragette, a little bit making fun of them. But Emmeline was a bit of a Francophile and really liked the French-sounding suffragette. So she thought, well, why not? Let's take it on board. Let's appropriate it and use it. So they did.
And what were they doing to gain attention? So this is a movement that's gradually building momentum. Women around the country are thinking, yes, absolutely, we should have the right to vote. So they're joining this. What are they then doing to sort of get their voice heard on a more national level to the people who they need to?
So the main thing that they were involved in doing was trying to get that question, when will the government give women the vote? That question was being asked wherever they could. So they would try to go into rallies and political meetings, particularly when there were elections or by-elections, to ask that question. And they would, if they were seen, they would often be turfed out because they were seen to be interrupting these meetings, and there wasn't a willingness often by a government representative to answer the question. So what we have is that attempt to get that question raised in all sorts of venues, not just political venues, also in any other public events. They would pop up and show their banner or shout out, when will government give the women the vote? So these disruptive tactics grow over time. And initially, it's very much the sense of bringing women together to push for that demand. So including going to Westminster, getting a mass of people to go, and also watching as debates are put forward, with now and again somebody saying, well, OK, we will table that debate, and then often a backsliding on it. So you have women coming to Parliament to see what's going to happen in Parliament, and then the answer doesn't come, yes, we will give women the vote, but some kind of backsliding on that. And then there are key moments where you have violence by the state, or violence thereafter also by the women, by the state through, for example, the Black Friday day, when the state-sanctioned violence to the women who are waiting to hear what's going to happen happens. And then partly as a result of that violence, the campaign strategies shift a bit to things like the breaking windows and other forms of arson. In essence, I think what you can say is that deeds, not words slogan that the suffragettes used was a slogan critiquing the government that kept on saying it would give women the vote and wasn't. So they were saying, we want deeds, we want that act, we want that legislation to allow women to vote, not just empty words. But it was also a slogan for the activists, the women themselves, saying, if you want to be equal citizens, if you want to have a vote, you need to engage. We need your deeds as well, not just, we want women, we want us to get the vote. But all of this campaigning starts in earnest in 1903. I mean, in terms of the suffragette movement, and the much more visible campaigning starts in 1903. You could argue it started more than 50 years before that. And then there are key moments, including the death of Emily Wilding Davison in 1913. And then you have this period between 1914 and 1918 with the war, when some women stopped campaigning, but many continued.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what was happening at this time in order for them to need to stamp this very bold messaging onto a coin and then put them back into circulation.
So against the grain of everything that women are supposed to be doing and how they're behaving. So I think they come together in small and larger circles, and they try and bring some fun and colour to it and keep on thinking, well, what else could we do? And I think also that the way it was structured allowed and encouraged people to do whatever they thought would be useful. So there is that very famous speech of Emmeline in the Royal Albert Hall, where she says, something like, if you can do this, do this. If you can do that, do that. And each of you, it's to use whatever approach you want to, bearing in mind that some of them are more likely to get you into trouble than others. So I think that allowing people to find their own way of making noise being visible is part of what this is. Then some of the militancy results in some very, very negative media portrayal of all of this, maybe understandably, but then the general public possibly not so sympathetic, and maybe they're looking at ways of broadcasting their message in ways that will reach more people in interesting ways, and ways that will create those conversations.
And stamping your message on a penny is one way to go about it. Why do you think coins in particular were chosen for a vehicle to spread this message?
Yeah, coins are a vehicle for expressing power, aren't they? They are not just a medium of exchange. They are definitional of the country, the state, the kingdom, the ruling person. So why not take that on in the messaging that you are trying to give to the country, to the king, to the state, to those in power? It's a very clever idea, really.
Could you tell us a little bit more about Centenary Action? What are the aims and what are you sort of striving towards?
We started in 2018 and we are campaigning as a coalition to 2028. So we're using the centenary of these two key moments, centenary of the 1918, some women getting the vote, and centenary of 1928, women getting the vote equally with men. So it's 10 years of campaigning, and we only have a little bit left of those 10 years. We are campaigning for a gender equal parliament to look at the barriers for why women don't get selected, elected, why they don't stay as well. And we focus very much on Westminster, though we are interested in the wider links with other parliaments within the UK and with local politics. But we are addressing all of these with a coalition that includes the women's wing of things like the Labour Women's Network and Conservative Women's organisation CWO and Elect Her, but also Mumsnet, the WI, Girl Guidings, a lot of the feminist ecosystem, if you will, working to bring all of that together, but also to address particular barriers to women in Parliament. And we are currently at 40.5% of women. So it's an ambitious target, but there's a sense if we don't do it now, when will we? And there's a lovely attempt to use the synchronicity and that link with history to say, let's celebrate the centenary of equal franchise with equal representation. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to deliver and to remember and look back on the amazing sacrifices of the previous generation by delivering what they would say would be the ambition that they had all along?
That was Professor Helen Pankhurst, CBE, to give her full dues. And it sounds like you had a great time interviewing her, Abigail, even if you were a bit croaky during the interview.
I had lost my voice, but luckily it did start to come back. But I had a lovely time. I love Helen Pankhurst. What a joy and an absolute privilege to talk to her.
If you want to find out more about Helen's movement, Centenary Action, go online, centenaryaction.org.uk. You'll be able to look up more of what she's doing, the wonderful work she's doing today to keep the cause going.
They're campaigning for a gender equal parliament by 2028.
Which is still a little bit of a way off. I think the stats were 40.5% now, so they've got 10% more to go to make it up.
But they've got lots of different campaigns that they're doing at the same time, lots of different areas of Parliament they're trying to work on and improve. So there's tons going on that you can get involved with there on the website.
It's worthwhile spending a little time talking about how these coins might have been made and used. So these votes for women coins, when they're done, they will go back into active circulation and they will circulate around the entire population. They could do it in London, it could end up in Scotland.
It doesn't seem like there were many of them done. And again, that ties in with the idea that maybe it was just somebody doing what they could for the movement. But it's getting them out there and they're finding their way into pockets of people who might be supportive and might see that as a stride in the right direction.
Of the ones that are actually left, it looks like they were done by the same person because the nerdy bit is that they were all using the same punches, basically. It's all the same typeface. So it was probably just one shop, one person, one area that was doing it. But that's still getting your message out there and getting it into circulation. And it's not just political movements that have done it. We've seen this with advertising as well, because people have used the coinage to get advertising, marketing messages out to the public.
We have a selection of coins in the museum's collection, which have been defaced with stickers. So these are both pre-decimal and decimal coins, and they are advertising businesses, effectively.
Events, activities,
pubs, plays.
And this isn't actually technically illegal, is it?
It's not technically illegal to...
But don't do it.
But please don't do it. Please don't do it. And I'm sure David is champing at the bit to tell you all about the 1971 Coinage Act.
I mean, I frame that as a question, but I know it's not illegal because I'm well familiar with Section 10 of the 1971 Coinage Act.
Do tell the public, David, what Section 10 of the 1971 Coinage Act actually is.
The précis would be that it is illegal to melt down or break up any coin that's essentially circulating now or has recently circulated. That you can read the full act online and all of its various amendments and
various follow-ups, which are riveting as they sound, to be honest.
But the illegal bit nowadays is to break down the coins or melt them down. Back in the day that we were talking about with the suffragette pennies, it would have been illegal to deface them in the way that they did.
Yeah, but it didn't stop. It certainly doesn't stop people actually legally, anyways, putting stickers on there to advertise whatever they're doing, whether it be an event or a pub or an actual venue or whatever it might be. But it is strongly discouraged because it does affect their active circulation, because it means that people can't actually see them clearly. But it has been widely used, and we've got quite a lot of examples in the collection as a result of that. From advertising, we're going to change direction and look at a much more personal way coins have been altered. David and Abigail went to the Foundling Museum to speak with Dr. Jeanette Bright and look at their collection of tokens. These are objects that were left with abandoned babies and abandoned children at the Foundling Hospital by their parents when they were left with no choice but to give up their child. This was often because they were unable to afford to care for their child or whatever that might be, and these tokens were therefore an object of hope, as it was the only way that the parents might reclaim that child if their circumstances changed.
They have such a variety of tokens there. So Jeanette was telling us that pretty much anything could be a token. It could be a scrap of paper, it could be a piece of fabric, but very commonly they did use coins. And very often they were engraved with a personal message, and they had a hole in them so that, possibly either the parents wore them around the neck or they hoped that the child would be able to do so. And they're incredibly emotive, personal objects.
You found this a really powerful interview to be involved with, didn't you, Abigail?
It was, yeah, it's incredibly poignant to see these little tokens, and every token symbolised a child.
A life left at the Foundling Hospital.
And I mean, they had full cases of them, didn't they? Jeanette brought some of the more interpretable tokens down so that we could have a look at them, but we went up and had a look at their cases, and there is rows and rows and rows of these things that they have on display. And a great many of them, as you were saying, have been engraved in a really personal way.
name's Dr. Jeanette Bright. I work here at the Foundling Museum occasionally as a museum assistant, but I've also been involved in a lot of research behind the scenes. So a lot of their historic exhibitions, I've done some research for the museum. But I came in as a visitor and then did some volunteering and then ended up researching the hospital and getting a PhD.
You came in as a visitor and left with a doctorate.
Yes. Can't guarantee that for everybody that comes in.
That's a ringing endorsement.
But yeah, people should come to visit the museum just in case.
When it was active and caring for children, I wonder actually, could you tell us, first of all, when it was active?
Yeah.
And roughly how many children the Foundling Hospital would have cared for?
Yeah, so they got their Royal Charter in 1739. They didn't actually open the doors until 1741. And at that point, they had a house in Hatton Garden that they used while they were building the hospital here. About 46, 47, they moved into the first wing of the hospital, which they by then built on the land really where the hospital is. The building itself's gone. And they built the hospital in stages. So by 1751, the whole building was complete and they could then separate the children. So between 1741 and 1756, they had quite a restrictive entry. So there was about 4,000 children admitted then. Then they had a system called general reception, which meant that any child under a certain age could be admitted. And in 4 years, they had about 15,000 children. That caused huge logistical challenges and all sorts of problems. So eventually they shut the doors. And overall, up till 1954, it's about 20,000 children. But as I say, 15,000 came during that very short period.
Wow.
They went back to restricting entry. Sometimes there was 4 in a year. Sometimes there was 1,000.
And for the most part, this was all fairly well, it would have had to have been a fairly well organised system, which sort of brings me onto the topic of why we wanted to come down here and speak to you, really, and that's the tokens. I wonder if you could tell us just a little bit about those in a general sense, please.
Yeah, well, the tokens, it's not a new idea for even Britain or in Europe. So you can go to other museums in Europe and they have tokens there. I think the whole idea of tokens dates back to Roman, Greek idea that you would, if you left a child, you would leave it with something. The purpose being that you could reclaim that child. I think there were even Roman laws that said, if you could prove that you'd left that child, if you changed your mind, you could come back for them. So a token really is anything that someone wants to leave. It could be a piece of paper, it could be a piece of fabric, a ribbon, or something like a coin. And it's handed over with the child when the child's admitted. It's kept wrapped in the admission document, and it's really used officially as an identifier. So if you come back to claim the child, you can say that you left it with this particular token. Actually, what happens is often the parents will put some sort of emotional content on these coins, which is not their official purpose, but it's why they are loaded with emotion.
Yeah, they're incredibly emotive objects, aren't they? And they're incredibly personal, whether or not they're sort of just selected for being something of relevance or something that the family has or has owned for a while, or whether they've been specifically inscribed or incredibly emotive objects.
Yeah. And we've got bits of paper that are just cut in a heart, bits of fabric cut in a heart. There's lots of hearts and some engraved on tokens. Right, so this is a little coin. And it's got the name Anne Butler on it and also a date, 15th of October 1757. Actually, we do know which child this went with. So that must have been made specifically for the admission. What day was she admitted? She was admitted the 12th of November. So she was about a month old, which is quite common. But I think what's particularly interesting in this one is Anne Butler, whose name is inscribed on there. She was a child that was claimed. And I think that's the other thing that's quite interesting. I said that quite a lot of them were claimed children. We don't seem to have, apart from perhaps one, record of anyone asking for the token back. even when the child has died, which you would think, oh, well, if I didn't have a child, at least I'd have the token. It doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah.
And we don't know why. There's nothing in the records to say they can't have it. And it may be they were just too scared to ask. You know, they came in front of the governors, you know, they just didn't feel very comfortable. But this little girl, Anne Butler, she was claimed, and her father, he gave his occupation as a watch engraver. So we wonder, and we don't know, but we wonder if he engraved it. Because we're always talking about the mothers in these things, about the mother handing them over. There are notes by fathers, and there's a couple of Masonic tokens in the collection. And I think it's a reminder that actually the fathers often were involved.
Yeah.
You know, that's a little hint we don't know, but that's a possibility.
I mean, there's such emotive pieces. There's all kinds of reasons why these children would have been given up.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes they do give a reason. There's one woman who says her husband has gone mad and she doesn't know what to do. There's quite a lot of naval wives and their husband is away for years. Well, I listened to your podcast, so I know all about life at sea. And the women were left at home having to cope. You know, there was a ribbon with a woman, and she had 12 children and she handed the last one over. But they came back and claimed it, and actually they claimed it and she still had the ribbon. So you knew that she'd kept that ribbon.
It meant a lot.
Yes, and what was also interesting, when we put the two ribbons together, which we only did a few years back, the one that was in the admission form was quite pristine compared to the one we think she'd been handling it, you know. So, right. The children never, well, I'd like to say never kept their name. So we did have a few war orphans, actual orphans, and they kept their name. Some of the children, there was a scheme whereby you could admit a child if you donated £100. And what's quite interesting with those is that often there'll be a note and the child seems to keep the name that the mother gave it. Now, as far as we know, they weren't supposed to, but it does seem like, you know, money gave them the ability to do things that normally anyone wouldn't. But most of the children were completely renamed, the idea being that it was like a new start, but also because the mother wasn't supposed to know who the child was. They didn't want them coming back. They didn't want them coming back without going through the proper system. It was very much about rules and regulations.
You didn't want that kind of informal contact.
No. And there were a couple that got round the rules. We know of one, in fact, one of the ones where they'd paid £100 and the father came back. The mother was one of his servants. And somehow somebody had found where the child had gone, were blackmailing him. And he made the comment that his wife knew about the child, but he was a moral man and he didn't want his daughters finding out. So, you know, his morals were slightly different. Right, so this one's particularly interesting. So it's another one of the engraved ones. And it's got on this one, it says Elizabeth Harris was born June the 6th, 1756. And then it's got an angel engraved in the middle. It's an actual coin on the back, so you can see that one.
That's a beautifully detailed engraving as well. So.
Yeah. So the interest, this is another one we have actually matched. And we think the father was actually convicted at the Old Bailey for stealing a bushel of coals. And for his crime, he was transported. And he was transported. I actually found the ship that he went on. If it's the same John Harris, the father's name was John Harris, and we think it was him. Can't be 100% certain. But that sort of reminds you of this idea of convict tokens, because we know that, you know, there were convict tokens.
Absolutely, yeah.
So he was sent away for 7 years. And so that's another reason why a mother would have to give the child up.
That's incredible. And this is a James II coin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gosh.
But again, it's quite professionally done.
Yes.
We don't know what his occupation was, I don't think.
And with the symbol of the angel in the middle, and we see that that's a fairly common motif on coins prior to this anyway.
Yeah. We haven't got many angels, but
I can see it's got a hole in it with the idea to be worn around the neck or around the wrist, I assume.
yes, sometimes the records will actually state they're put around the neck or put around the wrist. Yeah, sometimes the ribbon or the thread is still in the admission. They kept that as well. And I think there's something about, we don't know if these were worn by the parent before, if the child is a month old, whether they had that coin made anyway, and perhaps they wore it and then they handed it, and it's having that close contact.
Yeah.
Occasionally the records actually say they hand over a coin and they ask that the child always wears it. Now, that wouldn't have happened, but you have this feeling that perhaps the mother later on is sort of looking out for a child wearing the token if they didn't really understand the system, or just hope they'd, make an exception.
Perhaps the coins are very often historically sort of imbued with special powers and good luck and good fortune. So maybe the mothers were hoping that wearing the special token or coin would protect the child.
Yeah, well, yes, because we have got some coins and they're labelled as touch pieces, which I understand are, coins like you would put in your pocket, then you would hand it out, but it had a lucky element. And we've got other tokens. So there's a clenched fist, which is a Roman good luck sign. That's in the cabinet. So we know that's a good luck token. And we suspect there are others that are like that. Right, now this is another really good coin. This is a rebus. So it's got a puzzle on it. So I don't know if you can read it.
It's got a puzzle on it. How does that work?
So I'll so see if you can work out the puzzle.
Oh my goodness.
It's not too difficult. So
Okay.
there's an I and a W and then a little picture of an ant.
And a W.
So it's an I want, yeah. And then it's got RE and leaf.
I want relief.
Yeah.
Wow. Gosh.
Sadly, we've never been able to track down the child that it belongs to.
God, and there's an incredibly detailed engraving of a baby underneath.
Yes, the little baby in the crib underneath. Yeah.
And that is 1759 as well.
Yeah. Some of the coins, they're not really low value. And for the people, if they were really poor, why would they hand over something, they would have the lowest denomination. I think that says something that they often, and we see this in other tokens, there's a little ring in there with a ruby on it. I think they're giving something precious over with the most precious thing that they're handing over.
That was Dr. Jeanette Bright on the highly emotive subject of foundling tokens kept at the Foundling Museum in London. But now that we come back into the studio, I think we should unpick that a bit, because we often have coins there engraved or defaced in some way with an image that often relates to the child that was left. And that seems to be the common theme throughout all of the coinage that they've got within their collection. So why would they use coins then? I think that's the thing we need to unpick a bit, is why? Why pick a coin as opposed to a ribbon or anything else?
Well, there's two types of coins here that they've got in use. There's the sort of the higher value, higher denominational coins, or the historic coins, and there's the lower denominational value, more commonplace coins, right?
Yeah, so you've got the everyday in your lower value things, so things that you might actually just have in your pocket and just hand in at the time when you're taking your child there, or the precious material. That could be precious in several different ways.
So you've got two different types of coins being used as tokens there. Those high value ones might have a real sentimental value. It might be that you've got a lucky gold coin that's been passed down for a few generations of your family, or you might have, this might be a real prized possession or a significant amount of your familial wealth.
Because she mentioned in the interview that, well, whilst you were there, she mentioned to you two that they've actually got an angel, a touch piece, which has actually been a hole put in it from Charles II's reign. And now we're talking in the mid 18th century, the 1750s, somebody's left this coin as a foundling token. So that's been around the family probably for a long time and was originally quite precious anyway, because it was part of this touching for the king's evil ceremony.
I think what's important to think about as well is, regardless of the actual value of the coin, that these are symbols of a child. And it's incredibly sad. It's absolutely tragic that you would be in a position in which you had to hand over your child. But they are also a positive thing as well. They are also a token of hope, because the reason you're handing a token over with your child is in the hope that one day you might be able to get them back. If you had no interest in ever claiming your child again, you wouldn't have left a token.
And that's where you get these elements of personalization. And you saw those more on the lower denominational coins as well, where you get things like large copper pennies, for example, that sort of thing, that were filed down into a canvas from which you can then, you've got a large space to engrave something really personal. You can put a name on there, you can put a date of birth on there, you can put, as I saw on one, the image of a baby in a crib on there, or an angel or something lucky or protective, and that's all incredibly personal.
I think the one that we finished the interview clip with, for me, says it all. The little cryptic message on there, which basically, I want relief, and a picture of a baby. That said it all to me. People are not, well, the vast majority of people are not giving these up because they want to. It's because they've got no choice. I should point out, however, that some of these children were reclaimed. Just try and get a positive note into this. It wasn't all doom and gloom. But that is thanks in part to the personal messages that is kept on the actual tokens. And these types of personal messages, they don't just relate to the Foundling Museum. You get them in other places as well. You get things such as love tokens, which I suppose in many ways the foundling tokens are, I suppose, a symbol of love.
Yeah, there's a very long tradition, isn't there, of coins being associated with love, with good fortune. And historically, silver coins like the sixpence would have been made into a love token, very often sort of bent into a sort of a curve by hand and passed from one beloved to another.
And you get personal messages inscribed on there, or sometimes you get the coin cut in two. So the idea is that two parts will be taken by different people because you've been separated, and for whatever reason. And when you come back together, you can show that the love has been reunited with a symbolic rejoining of these two halves. And when you're looking at people being separated, you've got other examples of where personal messages may have been engraved on coins in a slightly grimmer version of convict tokens as well.
Yeah, and convict tokens comes about at about the same time as the Foundling Museum as well. We're talking sort of the late 18th century. 1786 is the point at which a penal colony is established in New South Wales and Australia.
This is part of the great British justice system of the time, sending our criminals all the way across the other side of the world as punishment for what they've done.
Around 160,000 of them in total transported. Wow. And it was, it was a huge number. And it was the case that so many of these people who were being transported made or had made for them essentially their own kinds of love tokens to leave behind with their family. Usually things like copper coins, often when we got the cartwheel pennies coming in at the end of the 18th century. Big, large
pennies, really good surface for engraving things on.
Huge canvas, and copper being really quite malleable as well meant that these could be engraved with quite a lot of detail. You'd get people, either they'd hire people to engrave them for these purposes, and you'd get people working down the docks doing engraving on coins.
Just before you get sent off to the to New South Wales.
Exactly. Or you'd do it yourself, and you'd leave a message like, remember me, keep me in your thoughts, or something to do with freedom or justice or being imprisoned. You get little images of doves, for example, for freedom, and of manacles.
So the idea is that these were made by the convict, or the convict would have them made, and then they would give them to their families as these tiny keepsakes.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, transportation as a punishment was intended usually to be temporary, but in reality, it really rarely was.
I mean, going to Australia in the 1700s is no mean feat.
Yeah, I can't imagine many came back. And that's bringing us really to a close of our episode. But before we finish, I wanted to do the traditional penny for your thoughts. So the takeaways that we've got from this episode. I want to start with you, David. What are your thoughts on this?
So the line from my research that really struck me here was this idea of engraving coins as part of the everyday practice of political expression. So for me, all of these different types of coins, all these different pieces, whether you're fighting for women's suffrage or you're expressing your discontent at being punished by transportation and sent off to Australia, anything like that, it all forms part of a tapestry of resistance or empowerment. This idea that you've got a small individual act, somebody doing something for a cause that they believe in or that they feel they've been forced into. And the way that they choose to express themselves here is through the coins. They're objects of state. They're objects that are highly controlled and regulated in their size and shape and specifications. And it's that act of making them very, very personal, I think, that transcends any kind of large political action and brings it back to the person involved.
And it's for different reasons as well, isn't it? This has been, in many instances, two fingers to the state. It's been a rejection of power. It's been an expression of love. But they used the vehicle of the coinage because they have an intrinsic power in and of themselves. They're everyday items which say an awful lot. And that's been a recurring theme that keeps coming up throughout this whole series. What about you, Abigail? What's your thoughts?
I've been struck by just how poignant some of these messages are on the coins. So you've got the votes for women, you've got women who are taking matters into their own hands and doing what they can to spread this incredibly important political message. 100 years on, I totally get why they did that. It's completely relatable and understandable. And the same with the foundling tokens. The idea that you would be in that dreadful position to have to leave your child, but you're leaving them with this token of hope that you might one day be able to get them back. It's that sort of symbol of that bond between a mother and a child that is completely understandable nearly 300 years later. So these messages sort of transcend history.
And I think it's the relatability that we've got with this particular episode, because often for listeners, a coin from, say, the Elizabethan era or the Georgian era, it's completely alien. It may as well be from Mars because they're never going to see it. But the concepts which we're conveying today, fighting for something you truly believe in, votes for women, whatever the cause might be, or having to put a message of love and affection about the child that you have onto a coin, those are things that continue to resonate because they are about people and they're about the individual lives. And I think that's why this episode has been so powerful. And with that, it just leaves me to say a big thank you to our wonderful guests on this episode, Professor Helen Pankhurst and Dr. Jeanette Bright. And I, of course, have to thank David.
Thank you very much.
And Abigail.
Thank you
for joining me on today's episode. Our music for the episode is by Justin Bryant, and our editor has been Hugh James. If you've liked what you have heard today in this episode, please rate, like, and subscribe, or visit the museum's website, royalmuseum.org.uk, to find out more. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.